Hey there, this is Sam Outlaw, and you are listening to Walking the Floor.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas. That's right, this is Chris Shiflett, bringing you another wonderful edition of Walking the Floor. It's a big week, ladies and gentlemen, big week. Not just because I just got back from an incredible tour of America. It's not just that. It's not just because I've surfed for the last 2 days in a row in grovelly little slop, admittedly, but still, that's a new record for this year, 2 days in a row. It's not just that, people. It's that this is the week that my brand new record, West Coast Town, is hitting the stores. It has hit the stores. It's in the stores now. If you go down to your local mom and pop, it should be stocked. If you go on over to Apple, it's there in the iTunes store or Apple Music. It's in Spotify. It's everywhere you want it to be, ladies and gentlemen. West Coast Town. Finally, after all these months of me just fucking incessantly babbling about it, you can go check it out, and I hope you do. Oh, man, and by the time you hear this, I guess it's not worth announcing that I'm doing an in-store tomorrow. I'm taping this on Friday. You're not going to hear it till Monday. But tomorrow on Saturday, I'm doing an in-store record release party out at Side One Dummy. So when you're listening to this, just imagine how much fun that was. And if you're like, whoa, damn, I missed that, then you should know that next Saturday, I'm doing another in-store down in Long Beach at Fingerprints. Great little record store down there. Fingerprints in Long Beach. And if you missed that, there's more. Bottle Rock up in Napa Valley. Playing that on the 27th of May. Whew. I mean, there's probably a whole bunch of other shit I'm supposed to be mentioning, but that's pretty much the long and the short of it. If you want more, go on like Facebook, my Facebook page, my website. There's probably things that I'm forgetting that I should be talking about, but, I'm like kind of senile, and I did just get home, and I'm still a little like, I got like tour brain a little bit. Anyway, let's get to the Zounds.com ad. Now, you know that Zounds makes gear affordable. You know that they're going to split your order into 4, 6, 8, or 12 monthly payments. And you know they've got free shipping on every order with no minimum purchase required, no exclusions. But did you know that they've got the greatest gosh darn customer service in the world? Because every person you talk to, it sounds a real musician, man. So call 866-996-8637 or go to Zounds.com. All right, let's talk to Sam Outlaw. My guest this week is Mr. Sam Outlaw, a West Coast singer-songwriter whose music career has taken an interesting path over the years. It's a little different than most. In his young adult life, he held down a good job in advertising before committing to music full-time. But when he did, among other things, he scored Ry Cooder to produce his first record. And the man has not slowed down since, logging endless miles out on the road and playing anywhere he can. Like he says in our talk, the harder you work, the luckier you are. And the day that he came in, Sam wasn't in the mood to play one of his own songs, so he played me a Hank Williams classic and was nice enough to let me pick a little bit on it too. I'm the one kind of plucking away on an unplugged Gretsch, which is a little weird, but I didn't. That's all I had. I didn't have a second acoustic. He was playing my acoustic beautifully. He's strumming away nicely on it, and he's even doing a little whistle. Anywho, his new record, Tenderheart, actually came out on Friday too, April 14th. So make sure you run out and grab a copy of both of those records. This is Sam Outlaw on Walking the Floor.
we had a mutual friend named Ry Cooder, and he was like, "Hey, I've got this friend named Ben. He's got a show on Comedy Central."
Here, you know what? Chuck up on your mind.
Sure.
Because this is good stuff.
Oh, this is potentially
Because didn't Joaquin and Ry Cooder
yes.
work on your
on my
first
debut
record,
album? Right? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So is this okay right
Yeah,
here?
we're going, man.
What I was saying about my friend Ben is anyway. So I was friends with Ry Cooder, and he hit me up and said, "Hey, I have this friend named Ben. He's got a show on Comedy Central." And he has this idea to do kind of like a country music thing, but he's not exactly sure what he wants, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, like, what's your point, kind of, you know?
Right.
And he's like, I don't really know, but, Ben, I think maybe Ben had, like, heard my, like, a self-release record I'd put out and was like, he can tell that you guys are kind of on the same page. You both love kind of classic country and blah, blah. So he wants to just get together and chat. And I was like, cool. So I actually met with Ben Hoffman in, like, it must have been 2014, or maybe a little earlier. But anyway, so we at this point, I still had my full-time job. I was working in an office out in West Hollywood. And we got together at this little cafe out there called Swingers and sat down. And he starts talking to me about what he wants to do. And it just made no sense. and I was just like... Well,
was this before he had done the skit?
No, he had. So he had the show, and
okay.
and Joaquin had sent me a couple of those. So like, right. I remember I was in a coffee shop working when Joaquin sent me the YouTube links to these sketches on the Ben show, and that the song "Eatin' Pussy and Kickin' Ass," and it's up there, and I'm like, oh, this is funny, it's like a dirty. But then when it gets to the part where he takes the guy back to his room and finds out the prostitute he hired is actually a man.
Right.
But he says, so I sucked his dick and kicked his ass. I spit out my coffee. And I was like, this is my shit. This is funny. At the very least, I need to meet this dude.
Yeah.
So we get together, and again, he kind of explains what he's going for. And I was just like, dude, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what you're talking about. Are you trying to do a comedy thing? Like, are you trying to just take this character that you had started on this sketch show and make a record with him? Are you trying to do a music thing that's just funny?
Yeah.
I don't understand. And he's like, I don't really know.
Right.
And he's like,
well, that's what's so great about his record is that it sort of blurs those lines.
It does.
Like, it is funny as all fucking super offensive.
Yes.
But it's actually good.
But
you find yourself listening to it.
Yeah.
Over
and I remember, so he says to me, he's like, I just know that I don't think I want to just go to Nashville and, just hire all these studio players and make a really slick Nashville record. And I was like, no, that's exactly what you should do.
Right.
I said, go to Nashville, get the best guys you can get, and make a killer record. And I'm not saying that I was the only one that gave him that advice or anything, but so obviously he ends up going out there. He makes this record with Dave Cobb. And I remember, some months later when he sent me the record, and my wife and I were on our porch in Los Angeles, like early Sunday morning, listening to this really dirty country record. And again, to me, it's not good because it's dirty. Like, who cares?
Right,
whatever, it's dirty.
Right.
It's just that the songs are so catchy.
Yeah.
I mean, like, they really just did a great job of taking catchy, fun, obviously very traditionally minded country songs that happen to be ridiculously dirty,
right?
But putting them onto a record and making it sound crazily good.
It's funny, now that having this conversation with you, it occurs to me that his first record, and some of your music, it almost sounds like it's drawing from a similar era of country music, musically speaking. You know what I mean? Because like I think of your music as being less of the sort of four on the floor 70s
less
thing,
tough,
right? And a little more, almost like a little more 80s country, like in the, and I mean that with love, like
I agree.
The good stuff.
I totally agree, and I think on Ben's new record, the new Wheeler Walker record, it's even more so. I mean, it really does sound. You can kind of hear the Hank Jr. 80s vibe,
right.
Or even some of the more 80s stuff from Waylon. But yeah, I. That's been probably one of my bigger challenges is, by using my mother's maiden name Outlaw and having the word outlaw associated with my name.
Right.
People right off the bat, of course, are going to expect like kind of tough guy, beer slugging, and then I'm basically doing soft rock. And so trying to I guess show that yes, Outlaw is part of what I'm doing, and that's a family name, and
so wait, all Outlaw is your mother's maiden name.
Yes,
that is the best. That you had to go into music with that last name. That's crazy.
Yeah, so Outlaw is my mother's maiden name. We've we believe we figured out now that the origins of the name are actually British. For a while, we thought it was Scottish. But yeah, so I don't exactly know the whole story. I don't know if anybody exactly does, other than at some point, some of these people pissed off like the king somehow, got booted, and then there was something about like they, in order to get back in the good graces of the king, they were hired to go, and this sounds fake, but this is the most recent story. They were hired to go like hunt wolves. Like there was some wolf situation that was out of control.
This is somewhere, like straight out of Game of Thrones.
Yes. And it sounds fake, even verbalizing it. This sounds fake.
I love it.
Anyway, so yeah, the Outlaw name is, it's my mother's maiden name. It's a legit name. And yeah, I think at first when I was using the name, when I was just playing out at small little clubs and just doing music as a hobby, it was like, oh, I'll use the name because it sounds country. And,
right.
And then, of course, as you continue to go, and especially since my mom passed away, I think using, that family name takes on a deeper meaning.
Sure.
It becomes a little more than just a marketing thing to have.
I think it
catchy.
I think it's cool the way the sound of your music and your name are, almost a little bit at odds with each other.
That's right.
It's neat. It's like
But it's a double-edged sword too, in that some people hear it and go, cool, and maybe like 10% more people remember the name than would if I was using my given last name, Morgan. But then there is also a lot of people where it just like pisses them off. 'Cause like, who's this guy? Thinks he's tough. He's calling himself an outlaw.
Right.
It's like they think I'm trying to have some kind of like, white country cowboy gangster title that I've given myself.
Right.
So people who don't know the backstory,
you could evolve into that.
I could get tougher as things go on. I'm pretty sure I'm becoming more of a pussy with each and every tour.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe I'll get tougher. That'd be nice.
Before we get too deep into this, I have to ask you, who does your vintage denim jacket and satin shirt shopping for you?
That was all.
Because that is seriously on point.
Thanks, man. So speaking of being a pussy, I'd like to, I guess I like to not be too concerned about my outfits, again, being tough or like otherwise hardcore cowboy or whatever. But I was shopping at the gallery. My wife and I live in Glendale. So we were shopping at the Americana or whatever it is, the Americana or the Galleria. I can never remember which is which. Right. And we walked into Top Shop, and which is a spot that I like. And they had these few different like silk shirts, or as I call them, blouses, because they basically look like silk blouses. And so I bought a couple of those, and in fact, the jacket I'm wearing right now is a Top Shop jacket, and then the one I use in the album cover there, that blue one I bought there. So that's those are both the shirt and the jacket on the album cover are from Top Shop. And
I love that shirt. Looks like it needs it needs to have like cocaine residue all over the pocket or something.
That shirt has never had cocaine residue on it. But you
haven't toured for the album yet either, so
there's time.
There's time.
We still got a little time.
So you brought me a copy of it, but it's not out yet, right? Because I've only heard the 2 songs that are in Spotify.
Yeah. So the record is out April 14th.
Oh, that's the same day my record comes out.
When I saw the video that you did, I'm blanking on. I always get nervous.
The West Coast Town.
Yes,
or the
West
Sticks
Coast,
and Stones.
West
I put
Coast
a couple
Town.
of them up.
Yeah. But I saw it on there. It said April 14th. I was like, there you go.
How funny! I'm leaving for tour on Sunday. We should be going on tour together. We're blowing it.
This feels like we maybe could align this up a little better.
I'll have my publicist talk to your publicist.
Please you reach out to my people. Man. So I'm in kind of the same boat too. I'm gonna do a week of like press and then one show in the UK. Come home for like a week, and then I go out on tour pretty much just a few days before the record comes out. So yeah, we'll be touring probably. Touring
is really hard and expensive nowadays.
Isn't it great?
How do you pull it off? Because I'm like been in the throes. I'm leaving Sunday, and I can't wait to just be gone, so I don't have to like deal with all the minutia of getting things out there. But every time I do one of these, like tour for a solo project I'm doing and rent a van and book hotel rooms and hire some guys and do all that stuff, it adds up so fast that I'm always struck by the thought, how the fuck does anybody do this?
How does anybody do it?
That doesn't have the Foo Fighters or whatever to fall back on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's crazy. How do people do it?
Well, like my joke is, I can't afford to tour and I can't afford to stay home, so we might as well go tour.
Right.
Look, I'm very lucky to have a label that believes in me, and on my debut album Angelino, and also now on this album with the new record cycle, they are providing a little tour support.
Oh, wow.
So that helps.
That's pretty unheard of these days.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Or I mean, I feel like it's unheard of to really for anyone to spend money on anything in any way.
Right.
But yeah, so Six Shooter Records, they're Canadian-based label actually, but they partner with 30 Tigers to put out the record.
Oh, wow, cool.
But so a little tour support goes a long way.
Yeah.
I've gotten good at doing it as inexpensively as I can. Like I remember when I got tour support on the last record, I kind of like got probably a little too excited and like. Paid the musicians maybe a little too much because I just for the first time had money.
Yeah.
But I blew through it so quickly.
Right.
And so this time I'm trying to correct that and try to make these dollars last a little bit longer. I'm trying to get a whole U.S. tour and a whole European tour out of this round of tour support because we're going to tour Europe in July. But and Chris, the simple answer is I have no idea.
Right.
I mean, up until a week ago, I had a ton of credit card debt because I put the record on a credit card.
Wow.
I'd been putting a lot of living expenses on a credit card, and I was just able to pay everything off. Thank God. But yeah, I think I have no idea. I guess try to tour as economically as you can. Try to have some merch that you keep fresh, so that when you maybe are hitting a town for the second or third or fourth time, you have you give that fan a chance to buy another thing. But
I mean, I watched some footage of you playing live on YouTube, I think it was, and you had a full band and everything. Is that how you normally tour?
So, like in the last since Angelino came out in June of 2015, I feel like I've done it all. I've done full band tours where it was me plus 5 people. I've done duo tours where it was me and just like my singer, or me and just my guitar player. I've toured Australia solo. I've done acoustic kind of trio thing where it was like me and like a couple, singer, and guitar players. So I've done a little of it all. I get quickly bored doing anything less than a duo. Like when it's just me on stage, it's not that I can't do it. I get kind of bored just hearing my own self. Like
Sure.
I like to have at least one person on stage to kind of vibe off of.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's nice to have somebody play the sing the harmony or whatever
well,
it
look,
is.
a lot of times when I'm writing a song, I'm writing the song literally with the harmonies in mind, or with like I leave space in the song for like, oh, here's where the pedal steel solo goes, or here's So I get bored pretty quick doing the solo thing. But duo and up, I have a really good time.
Right.
And it's fun to challenge yourself and I guess see all the different iterations of how that song can go live.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know how I'm doing it. I mean, like, especially now, got a baby, I have a 10-month-old boy. And, I mean, as you know, having a family, that just ups the ante in everything. Like, maybe you're willing to suffer for your art, but do you really want your precious wife and kid to suffer for your art?
Right, yeah.
Not maybe not so cool. So I feel like every day I wake up like, I'm a musician today, and this is what I do, but if I have to go take a job at Whole Foods tomorrow, okay,
right.
I'll do it.
Yeah, I read that you sort of got started a little bit later, like maybe in your early 30s or whatever.
Yeah.
But you don't sound like you got started later. I mean, you sound very polished and
Thanks, man.
And really together, as an artist or whatever. Were you playing through all those years?
So I first, like kind of the typical thing where like I picked up a guitar for the first time when I was 15, 16, learned some chords. In fact, I just listened to your talk with Aaron Lee Tashian, and he mentioned how he, like in high school, they like played Oasis songs.
Yeah.
Same for me.
Right.
Like I remember being really into Britpop at the time, so I was into Blur, Oasis, and Radiohead, but had a band kind of in high school that was horrible, but we, covered some Oasis. In college, I was dabbling a little more in songwriting, but very influenced, at that point by like, folkier stuff. I, of course, was into the Beatles and all that, but I was kind of finding my footing, I think, as a songwriter, and never did anything really significant in college. And then once I got out of college, there's that thing of, oh man, I love music, I like songwriting, but am I really going to do this for a living?
Right.
Like, I'm not that great of a singer. I'm not that great of a guitar player. Do I really think this could... So I kept it at arm's length for a long time. And I think I've played my first like Sam Outlaw show in 2009. I remember I was living in Long Beach. So I'd lived in Long Beach for a few years at that point. And I remember like I had this job in advertising, started feeling a little antsy, like I think the music thing is actually more important to me than I'm admitting.
Yeah.
So I put a band together. I remember I went to the local records, or the local like string store, World of Strings, and I was like, does anyone know a pedal steel player? Because like I didn't know any like
in the West Coast. It's tough.
Yeah,
there's like 3 of them.
Exactly,
and they're expensive.
Yeah, they're expensive. Yeah, like I've seen, like I know when you play often with Marty Rifkin, who's just amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm really lucky to have my steel player Jeremy Long, who's insanely from Huntington Beach.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah. It's like I always make a joke, like of course, our steel player, of course, comes at you from Huntington Beach, Surf City.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I remember I went out and I kind of put together this band and started playing out in 2009. And for a while, yeah, it was just as a hobby. I had a lot of friends that were musicians. In fact, again, another interesting connection with Aaron, the guy who produced his record, Eli Thompson, he produced a record for some friends of mine that had a band called Delta Spirit. And so one of the first things I ever put out was a self-released EP, which was produced by Eli. And so he produced this record I made in 2014. In fact, we tracked at New Monkey Studio, just like Aaron was talking about. We tracked a little bit at Frank Lenz's house. So... But that was I guess when it started getting a little more serious.
Right.
I don't remember what the original question was. You were basically saying I sound better than maybe my amateur status.
I just think it's interesting that you maybe started professionally, started sort of pursuing it professionally a little bit later.
Because I didn't want to be poor.
Right.
I looked around me and I said, okay. Again, I was making good money selling advertising. Maybe it's not the most creatively fulfilling career, but it's not that bad. Right, and I had free time. I had a flexible schedule. I was working from home. I could play out we'd play at like the dives in Long Beach, like the Prospector or Clancy's, and it was kind of like going good as a hobby.
Sure.
And then at some point though, I kind of woke up and was like, literally almost like upset that I had to admit to myself that I kind of wanted to do music.
Right.
Because it just seems so far-fetched.
Right.
It seems so unstable.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
all of the
it's
things that we know that it is.
Gazillions to 1 odds to ever getting anywhere.
Right. And again, as someone who I was never fully like just a pragmatist, but I was never really a dreamer either.
Right.
I was kind of a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And I think I saw that, look, talent is great and that's a nice thing to have, but it's definitely not a guarantee that just because you've got some good songs or just because you can perform those songs well or even just because you have a vision, there's absolutely no guarantee that the artistic shit that you want to do is going to become the thing.
Right.
Or is going to be a thing enough that you can survive off of it.
Well, I always say it's people that don't do this for a living would be absolutely shocked at how many people and steps there are between writing a song and recording it and making an album that you're really proud of, and then that album ever
oh my god
seeing the light of day anywhere,
being heard by more than 10 people,
right? Much less getting like a write-up in a
absolutely
good magazine or what, any of that kind of stuff. I mean, there's so many things that are completely out of your control as an artist that it's just, I mean, a lot of it's just kind of who you know and good luck and
when people talk about the luck thing, I'm like, it is luck, but I feel like luck isn't exactly the right word because there's a little bit of that.
It's got to be ready for the opportunity.
That's right,
too,
and there's a little bit of that whole like the harder I work, the luckier I get thing too.
Right.
But yeah, and in fact, I don't know if you remember this, but before I quit my job and started this full time, you and I played a gig together.
Oh, really?
We did. We played a Grand Ole Echo show together in probably 2013 maybe, but I
okay.
opened for you technically
okay.
so it was one of the shows where for some reason instead of them doing it at the the smaller room, the Echo,
Right.
they did it at the Echo Plex.
I remember that show.
Yeah,
I remember that it was the downstairs room,
yeah,
right?
which I hate. I hate
Yeah.
that huge room.
I
And
know,
I
too
remember
big.
being bummed that
Yes.
for whatever reason the show got moved to the bigger room.
I remember thinking the exact same
Yeah.
thing because there was a lot of people there, and
But
it
it
would have been
still feels-
jammed
yes.
upstairs.
And there's no way to fill up the Echo
Right.
Plex, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you always feel like, oh shit, there's no one here. But this is a good crowd. The
Right.
room's just massive.
yeah, just too spread
But yeah,
out.
I remember playing that show with you, and I remember, I believe you had Marty Rifkin in the band, and I just remember kicking back and being like, man, what a killer band. And I remember it was cool too because, I think even at that time, like you were a dad, and
Yeah.
I want to say, like, I think you pointed out how like your like kids, friends, parents were there,
Yes,
but it just
I
felt like a
remember that,
very
yeah.
happy,
Yeah.
like family kind of vibe. And I
Those
just thought
shows
that
are
was
always fun over there, and I was going to ask you about that. Like, I know you're based in LA, and,
Yeah.
and I was curious, like, what your scene here is.
Yes.
Are you like an East? I mean, you mentioned Long Beach, but are you part of that sort of East Side,
a
Grand
little
Ole Echo
bit
kind of
more,
world?
yeah. So like when I moved from Long Beach to LA proper, it was 2012, and I moved into an apartment in Angelino Heights. So I was in Echo Park basically, and then from there I moved to a place in, well, depending on how you want to pronounce it, either Glassell or Glassell Park. But my wife and I, we had a spot pretty much bordering on like Eagle Rock. So just like right in the heart of like white yuppie, LA. And now, yeah, we're in Glendale. And I can't pretend I really like Glendale that much, but the apartment we've got is really great. So we really like our place. Yeah. So but I definitely, yeah. I mean, if I'm gonna play out in LA, like the show for this tour is actually at the Troubadour. So this is a
cool.
rare West Side show.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it's playing the Echo. Like my album release show for Angelino was at Silver Lake Lounge.
Right.
I've played, of course, the Satellite, which used to be Spaceland. I played at like Lot 1, that little tiny cafe on Sunset in Echo Park. I think I've played everywhere you can play on the East Side, and that's probably where I'd prefer to play.
Right.
The East Side.
But Troubadour, wow, that's pretty cool. Have you headlined that place before?
I've never headlined. I've opened shows there a couple times.
Yeah.
But
it's for this kind of music, it's just such a legendary
It
spot.
is. I mean, it's the spot.
Yeah.
And to me, still, it's not just because of the history, but it's a great club. It sounds good.
Yep.
Like the size feels about right. Like it's big enough that you can fit a decent crowd in there, but it also doesn't feel dauntingly big or absurd or anything.
Yeah.
So I love the Troubadour, and yeah, that's going to be awesome.
My mom used to go see like poetry readings there in the
Really?
50s. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, that place been
I'm
there
so
forever.
jealous of people that really got to experience LA. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, if you're friends with like people in Nashville, like on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
And I always see. I mean, it's not so much now, but like in the last couple of years, just everyone bemoaning, the crowd, the expansion
yeah.
and I'm just like, you wimps. Like I live in a city that's been ruined for 80 years.
Yes, I know.
So just get used to it.
Yeah.
This is the way of the world. People
no.
are going to move to your town and tear down the old buildings and put in the shitty condos. But yeah, I'm wholly envious. I mean, like, again, making a record with Ry Cooder, that guy lived the history of rock and roll in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And that Troubadour was the Mecca.
How did you connect with him? I mean, that seems like a major coup for your debut
ridiculous
record to have that guy.
Talk about someone whose amateur status does not warrant certain things. That was a big one. So, so in 2013, again, I was at the point where I was getting a little more like, maybe I should try some touring, or maybe I should try this or that. And a friend of mine, a folk singer dude, who's based in Southern California, named Matt Costa. Have you ever heard of Matt Costa?
Yeah.
So he was on Brushfire Records, and I think he kind of came up because that dude, what's his name? This one folk dude kind of brought him up, and so Matt basically had a career flourish pretty quickly and was doing really well, and we had some mutual friends. And I remember at some point I said to him, hey man, like if you ever could have me open for you, that'd be really cool, And so almost like right away he's like, yeah, I'm doing a little West Coast, or I think he was doing like maybe half of the country tour, but he offered me the first of 3 slot for the West Coast part of the tour.
Wow.
So it was maybe like 8 or 9 shows.
Yeah.
And so I put a small acoustic band together, like kind of a string band almost, to make it simple. And we did these shows with Matt. And the middle artist, so the main support artist, was a gal who's now one of my best friends. Her name's Carly Ritter. And in fact, so she's Tex Ritter's granddaughter, the famous, like L.A. singing, kind of cowboy thing. Tex Ritter's granddaughter and the actor John Ritter's daughter. So she has this really cool.
Wait, so John Ritter was Tex Ritter's son?
Correct. A lot of people don't know that. Isn't that crazy?
How did I never know that?
I know.
That's insane.
Isn't that crazy? So Carly Ritter was the main support on this tour, and her band included Ry Cooder on drums, Joaquim's wife Juliet, and the band was rounded out with a couple other awesome musicians. But I met Joaquim on that tour because he was playing drums for Carly because he had just produced her record. So we all kind of became buds on that, short little tour. We stayed in touch. And then like a year or so later when I started going, okay, I'm going to make a record. I'm going to make a real record. Even though I don't know how I'm going to do it or who's going to produce or what's going to happen, I'm going to make a record. And I remember, again, going back and forth about who could produce it, had no idea. So at some point I said, well, fuck trying to find a producer. Maybe I should actually just think about who's going to play on the record, and we could kind of produce it ourselves. We'll just get into a room and play music the way people used to do.
Right.
And I remember my buddy Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes, whom I know you also had in here.
Yeah.
I remember Taylor was really helpful and like, I bet we could get Bo from My Morning Jack to play keys, and you know what? Let me hit up Greg Lees. I bet he'd play steel. And of course, Greg is like the guy.
He's the guy.
So anyway, we started kind of, I guess, plotting this thing on our own. But the first call that I made was to hire Joaquim to play drums because I was really impressed by his drumming, and I just thought he had a really cool. I mean, he kind of grew up in like kind of the Keltner school, so that was his vibe, and I was like, you know what? This record is going to be country, but it's everything else too. So I don't want just a bunch of straight ahead honky tonk heroes. I want people who get a variety of music.
Yeah.
So I called Joaquim, and it was basically Joaquim and then like kind of my regular band circling up in my living room in LA and rehearsing tunes. So I happened to be recording that rehearsal like on my iPhone, like put your iPhone on like the fireplace mantle, just so that later you can listen back.
The modern day boombox recording.
Correct. Yeah, the best compression money can buy. And so we did these. I want to say maybe 2 days of like rehearsal, just kind of playing through the songs, getting familiar. And he calls me up a couple days after we'd done this, and he's like, "Hey, are you still looking for a producer?" And I was like, "Yeah. Do you have anyone in mind?" And he's like, "Well, I'd like to send those songs to Ry. Like, did you record? You did record that stuff, right?" And I remember it just took me a second because I was just like, I wasn't trying to be no. It took me a second because I didn't want to be rude, but I was just like, why? Why send my shitty 3-minute pop songs to this like icon of like rock and roll cool?
Yeah.
One of the greatest guitar players and blah blah. And I'll be honest, I probably was familiar with 3 Ry Cooder records. Right. I wasn't like the guy who knows every nook and cranny of everything he's ever done.
Sure.
But of course, I was a Ry Cooder fan, and so that even at that point, I was thinking to myself, yeah, dude, go ahead, send my demos to Ry Cooder, and while you're at it, why don't we just call Tom Petty? Who else should we call? And anyway, so I send over these very shitty sounding MP3s to Joaquim, and then I think he must have just done a good job of kind of like making the pitch to his dad, like, hey, I like this dude's music. Here's some of his songs. What do you think? And the next thing I know, Joaquim is like, hey, Ry wants to get together and chat. So we went and had breakfast at Highland Cafe in Highland Park. And I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if this was like kind of an interview audition kind of thing where he was going to discover immediately that I was not hip at all.
He's going to know I'm an imposter.
He's going to know I'm an imposter, and it's going to be over, but at least I'll get to say I met him and, whatever. Anyway, so we got to breakfast and kind of hit it off. We started talking about country music. We started talking about California country. We started talking about, I guess the stuff that we like, songwriters we like. He brought up Wynn Stewart, and I'm the biggest Wynn Stewart fan, so I thought it was cool that he was talking about Wynn Stewart and not just like the normal like Buck Owens or the
right.
And again, I love Merle and Buck, but everyone knows Merle and Buck.
Yeah.
And like 100.
Wynn Stewart's like one of those code words. When you hear somebody say that, you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it indicates maybe you care a little bit more.
Right.
So anyway, we chatted for a while, and by the end of it, I think I'd gotten up some courage, and I just said to him like, Ry, if there's any chance you want to make this record with me, man, I really want to make a record with you. And he's like, me too. Like right there at breakfast. And I was like, well, hell yeah. Then we're off. Let's do it. And I remember I went into, I think we finally figured out kind of a schedule, picked a studio. I remember going in to talk to my boss because, again, I was still working my job.
Right.
I went and told her, I said, hey, I have an opportunity to make a record with a pretty sweet dude, and I think I need to take it, so I'm going to need a few days off. So I remember going in to like ask my boss for a few days off so I could make that record. But yeah, that was kind of how it started.
Did you do that record in a few days? Was it that quick?
No, not at all. We made 90% of it in a few days.
Right.
And then there were days in the studio where I just couldn't go in because I had to work, so Ry and Joaquin would be in there. Like they would call in, like I'm blanking on, like I'm going to mess up, I feel like I'm going to mess up his last name, but Arnold McCuller, I think is his name, but the dude who's like the main harmony singer for James Taylor or whatever.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So they'd call him in and he'd track some harmonies while I wasn't there.
Sure.
But for the most part, it was like all three, or first 3 days, me and the band all circled up in the room playing at the songs.
Yeah.
And then, I would go in and kind of overdub some vocals when I could, or go in and Ry would lay down a little guitar. So it was like most of it was done in 3 days, but then it took another like 2 weeks, I think it was, off and on to finish the record.
That's a great feeling, and I only recently experienced it with this latest record that I made of not being there when other people are adding things to your record. Because the gal, there's a woman that sang all the harmony vocals on my record named Kristen Rogers, who's amazing. She was actually on the road, and she just brings a little rig with her.
So they sent her the stuff, and then she
without me even knowing, Cobb photocopied all my lyrics and sent them to her and sent like rough mixes of everything, and she just sang harmonies, I think, on like everything.
Yes.
And just sent it back, and we just kind of, okay, put it there, put it there.
So cool.
And it was amazing. It's like,
Yeah,
Easiest
it's a
harmony
brave new
session ever.
world. Totally. And I'm, that was a little bit of because I'm a bit of a control freak. But when you have Ry Cooder, I think
it's in good hands.
You can let go of the reins a little bit and not sweat it. So.
Who did the new one? Because the 2 songs that I've heard sound amazing.
Speaking of a control freak, the new record was produced by me. Actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was produced by myself and Martin Pradler, which is the guy that Ry brought in to engineer Angelino. So I met Martin because that's kind of Ry's go-to engineer genius dude.
Right.
And he is just a in fact, speaking of, I listened to your chat with Marty Stewart. So you know how he made his record with Mike Campbell?
Yeah.
Well, Martin Pradler is good buds with Mike Campbell. They work together all the time. And the last record that Martin worked on before he started working on my record was Marty Stewart's record with Mike Campbell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
Martin is
Small
a
world.
Genius. He's really close with, like I said, with Mike Campbell. So he literally was wrapping up working on that record, and then we set up his in his living room. So he's got kind of a home studio, but I mean it's pretty like DIY.
Right.
He's got great gear and he's got cool stuff, and more like the most important thing is he got a good ear.
Sure.
But I mean, we literally made this record in a living room in just a regular ass house in the San Fernando Valley. But it was co-produced by me and Martin Pradler, and I can't say enough for how much that guy just. I feel like with each song, each thing we did, he's just so nuanced in his ability to pick stuff out. He's so good at kind of guiding the process in the most hands-off way that you could be hands-off, but while still kind of being a leader and still kind of making sure that shit doesn't get off track. So I produced it myself, but there's no fucking way it would have turned out sounding that good without Martin Pradler.
Sure, yeah. An important piece of the puzzle.
I mean, huge. And that's why, again, he gets a co-producer credit, because to say that he just engineered it would be a complete lie.
Right.
And to say that I produced it by myself would be a complete lie. But so it was me and Martin.
Did you bring in your regular touring band?
I did. So it was regular touring band, which is this girl, Darla on drums, Darla Hahn, who toured with me for a while. She's kind of prefers to stay home more these days, which that just means she has a brain. Like, who wants to go on tour? So she hasn't been my regular touring drummer for a little bit. But So Darla on drums, this guy Daniel Ryan on bass, who plays electric and upright. In fact, if you ever do anything in LA and need a good upright player, Daniel Ryan is amazing. And then my normal steel player, Jeremy, who also played some honky-tonk, kind of like telly, chicken picking stuff on the record. We brought back Bo Coster, so Bo, whose regular gig is playing in My Morning Jacket, he came in and did all the keys.
Oh, cool.
Which was sweet because Martin had this really cool old Fender Rhodes. And we did some weird little stuff. Like he had one of those like Prophet keyboards too. Those like, I think it's a 60s thing, maybe a 70s thing. But we got a little adventurous in like what we were doing. Like there was definitely no like, except for a couple of the tunes, which are more or less straight ahead, kind of like classic based country music.
Sure.
It's pretty like all over the place.
Right.
Like I think the two tracks that we've put out into the world thus far, the first one is basically more of a folk song that has some mariachis in it.
Yeah.
And then
I was gonna talk. I want to talk to you about that because that's something, and I think maybe there was some stuff on your first record too that had horns, which to me is a really. It's like a classic element of country music that wasn't in a lot of old country music, but when you think like Johnny Cash or even like Marty Robbins or something, like I love that sound of those mariachi horns.
Yes, me too. And I think mariachis in classic country was more associated with Texas, because that's obviously also a border state, and the norteño thing is more a Texas touch point. But obviously here in Los Angeles, Mexican music and culture is completely ubiquitous here. Yeah. So for me, I've always thought mariachis was like a Southern California thing.
Right.
So, and especially because I've always tried to play up the fact that, and to not be shy about the fact that I'm doing this based in Los Angeles, because there's a fucking awesome history of country music here. It was important for me to, especially on that first record, to have the mariachis. I had no idea who to hire or what to do, and of course Ry did. And then for the new album, we really only have the mariachis on the one track, but it was still important for me to, I guess, to make that connection again on this record. But yeah, it's what I was going to say is the other song we put out there, Trouble. I mean, to me, it basically just sounds like a Mellencamp song. It's like Mellencamp or even like a Linda Ronstadt thing, but it's just rock and roll. I mean, it literally starts with like a big old fat snare drum. Which 5 years ago, I was still in that mindset of like, any country music past 1975 must suck.
Right.
And like I thought it was like lame in the 90s because it's basically like they're doing big snare heads. But now, after what you kind of branch out and you get into other stuff, and now I'm like, look, if a song is a rock song, don't pretend it's not a rock song.
Right. Just let the song be what the song wants to be.
That's exactly right. Let it be. Yeah.
I mean, I get the sense from listening to your music that it is so steeped in West Coast vibe. And I know that you spent at least part of your childhood growing up out in the Midwest and South Dakota or something. So I'm wondering, is that like a conscious effort to get that in there? Like,
right, like is it completely forced?
Well, like when did you move out here? Like, I was
10.
Oh, okay, so part of your childhood.
That's right. So I was born in South Dakota. We kind of kicked around the Midwest till I was 10. Like literally on my 10th birthday, we moved to North County, San Diego. So we moved to Poway, which which means I grew up with
where Unwritten Law comes from.
I was just said Unwritten Law. I did another podcast a couple days ago, and I mentioned Unwritten Law. I mean, the Blink-182 guys went to my high school.
Oh,
they were
a
few years older, so they went there when I was there, but like Tom DeLonge's sister Carrie DeLonge was in my class. So like I grew up really that was everything.
Right.
Punk, pop punk especially. That was everything. And I say this almost embarrassingly because I wish I had a better grasp of it. But I was like maybe the one kid in Southern California that never really went through a punk phase. Like, and part of that is because I was in a conservative Christian home. I remember when I brought home a Pennywise record, which they had that big whoa, that bro hymn was. I mean, it was like if you didn't know that song, you must have been living under a rock, right? So whatever age that was, I don't know if I was in 6th grade or whatever it was, but that music still got to me, and I still really liked it. But I remember when I tried to actually kind of start listening to it, my parents associated punk with, well, the stuff that punk gets associated with.
I was going to say justifiably so. Especially in the case of Pennywise.
Yeah, totally. So, so I don't know if it was partially because I was almost just artificially, stopped from listening to it. And since then, of course, I've listened to the Replacements, and I've listened to the Clash, and there was a bunch of punk that I like to get into. But at least at those kind of formative years, it wasn't so much a part of my life, except kind of at an arm's length kind of way. So the West Coast thing for me is probably a little more, not just because I did partially grow up in Southern California, but my dad, we weren't allowed to listen to some stuff, but my dad, of course, had like every other American in 1994 bought the Eagles Hell Freezes Over live record, and we had Best of Eagles. I remember he had Best of James Taylor. He liked Bread and America, Crosby, Stills, Nash. Yeah. So the Troubadour era singer-songwriter thing was very much a part of my childhood. Yeah. And then he also listened to only one so the only country band I really grew up with was Sleep at the Wheel, which was in the 70s. They were like the Western swing revivalist band that were tight with Willie Nelson. So it was Western swing, James Taylor, and the Eagles. And when I listen to them,
good little formula,
yes, right.
Yeah.
And when I listen to my music now, or whatever, when I'm making it, I almost always still kind of hear those kind of three things. It's country rock, it's singer-songwriter acoustic music, and sometimes it's straight-ahead country.
Well, you can do like the opposite of what I did. See, I grew up listening to like heavy metal and hard rock and punk rock and all that stuff. And I sort of discovered honky tonk and old country and classic country and all that stuff way down the road.
But I think we're similar in that way, dude. Like, I grew up with the Sleep at the Wheel, but it wasn't until I was, I think, 21 or 22 that I quote unquote discovered classic country. So it was also for me much later that I heard like George Jones for the first time and flipped the fuck out.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have flipped for it so much if it hadn't have been for like growing up on Asleep at the Wheel.
Right.
But I think we have that in common.
Isn't it funny how the things that there's so much music that growing up, and this isn't just country, but country's a big one, that to me as a kid, I just thought, God, that's so fucking square.
Yes.
And then you just hit a certain age and you're like, whoa, that's so much better than what I've been listening to.
And what the fuck? What is that?
Yeah.
Like, I think some of it too, look, when I was kind of coming online about music when I was 14, 15, so that would have been like 1996, 97. Look, the shit that was on country radio back then, even now, like my band will cover 80s and 90s country, and there's a lot of it now that I understand is good and like, but there's a lot that I also think sucks.
Sure.
So like, I don't think that, let's say when I was 22 and I discovered George Jones, if instead of that had been George Jones, if it would have been like a Tim McGraw song from 1997, I don't think I would have flipped for it the same way. So I think that it's understandable that a lot of the stuff, especially in the back half of the 90s, that was when country was really transitioning to essentially arena rock ballads and country. And again, some of it I dig now, but back then I just don't think I would have connected with it.
It's funny, and this might be to my own detriment, but I just have a knee-jerk reaction to not even want to like anything mainstream when it's happening. You know what I mean?
Think that's
and
natural.
I think, and I've always been like that, and I think it's like it makes me miss certain things that are floating around the mainstream that are actually good, like when they're going on. So I feel like a Johnny Come Lately to stuff constantly.
Me too.
Me too. Funny. It's just a quirk.
Some of that also, though, I think is, I'm sure you could relate that feeling of you could just always listen to old music and it's going to probably be better.
Right.
Like, if I have a choice of listening to whatever, I don't even know what is on the mainstream top 10 country right now. My guess is that I would probably not even heard of most of these, whoever they are. But the chances of me, like, in order for me to listen to a new record, a record that's come out recently, I feel like it takes at least 3 or 4 people being like, have you heard the blah, blah, blah record? Oh, it's really good. You should listen to it. Hey, have you heard this one? Hey, man, I think you'd really like.
Sure.
I feel like it takes 3 or 4 people being like, you need to check this out in order for me. Because otherwise, I've got a lot of catching up to do.
Right.
Like, as much as I've listened to, in my mind, all of the classic country that's out there in the universe, there's probably still something I haven't heard.
It's a great thing that I only recently discovered that it totally speaks to what we're talking about, is if you go on Apple Music, they have these playlists that are called like country music hits, 1965 or 1971 or any year you want. And it's just the top hits from that year compiled in a playlist. And I've been listening to it because it sort of fills those gaps in, because it's almost like you're listening to the radio in whatever year you're curious about.
Little time capsule,
and most of it you'll know.
Right.
But then there's a few things that you're like, I never heard that before.
And that's
pretty good.
I think that's why I still get the buzz off of listening to old stuff, and still am drawn more to listening to, because like, again, like even like in doing some research recently on stuff I thought I already knew, like Eagles or Poco or Pure Prairie League and some of these country rock bands from that era, there was definitely a couple bands where I was like, wait, who the fuck? I've never heard of that band. And then you can go on allmusic.com and look them up, and sure enough, they had like an 8-album career.
Right.
And in that era were highly influential, but because they weren't the Eagles, they got overshadowed.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of people, you know, like in the late 80s and early 90s, you know, had heard Garth Brooks, but he kind of instantly overshadowed other equally great artists like Clint Black.
Right.
So maybe someone knows like a Clint Black song, but they don't realize that guy has like several awesome records.
Sure,
and, you know, so it is always funny to me, the stuff that we miss.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. That's it. I'll take you up on that. I'll hit up those playlists.
It's funny talking about that, because Marty Stewart, when he was in here, I asked him some questions
Isn't
about
that guy?
Clarence
I mean,
White.
he is a walking
amazing
encyclopedia.
Him and Dwight Yoakam need to like have their own podcast, and it would just be like you know, exactly like country music history lessons.
I would,
the two of them together. Wow,
I'd be very thankful for something like that.
But I asked him about Clarence White, and I know he owns Clarence White's guitar and everything. And then I was asking him, well, what should I listen to? Like, I only really know Clarence White from like the couple of things that that he played on in the Birds, but he hipped me to all these records. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Same thing. And the Wynn Stewart box set, which you probably already have.
You know,
I thought I knew Wynn Stewart until I got that box set. It's great. I didn't realize, I mean, it's like
I need to get
8 discs or something.
Have you noticed, I don't know if you've noticed that the amount of, like, there's like 7 Wynn Stewart songs on Spotify. So I do try to buy a lot of music still, but I still, like, oftentimes I'll buy the record and then it's just convenient to listen on Spotify. And then the artist is getting both the money from the purchase and they're getting the money from the stream. So in my mind, it's like a best of both worlds. But dude, I went on, I can't remember when it was, a couple years ago. Maybe it's better now. I don't think it is. But I looked up Wynn Stewart and it was like pathetic.
Yes.
So
they
Spotify.
Don't even have the Playboy isn't even in Spotify. It's like his signature song.
If these words can make it to anyone at Spotify, get some Wynn Stewart in your life. What are you doing? What are you doing?
We're starting a petition today.
That's right.
Hey, do you want to play a song? I just happen to have a guitar in the corner.
Do you want to pick a little bit too? Because I thought it was so cool when you play along with Mark. Oh, yes. Okay. So I am not really in the mood to do a Sam Outlaw song, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, whatever you want to do.
I was listening to. So I did a podcast recently where we started talking about Peter Bogdanovich. And one of my favorite films of his is Last Picture Show. And that
just watched that for the first time. Can you believe that?
Isn't it so insanely good?
Amazing.
That is just an amazing film. And so I don't know how you feel. Like, I love Johnny Cash, but I feel like there's the 4 Johnny Cash songs that have been so beat over our heads over the, all these decades that, to be honest, I don't go back and listen to Johnny Cash a lot. But I feel like, relatedly, Hank Williams' music has been just as, I guess, beat over our heads in pop culture, yet for some reason I still can't get enough of that guy. And so I started thinking about Hank Williams a couple days ago, and therefore went back and listened to some of it, and I was like, this is still the best country singer there ever. I mean, these songs are the best. So I kind of want to do a Hank song.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's
you got
do
a guitar?
I do. You
got
can
two
grab that one.
2 guitars right there?
I think I do.
So this one's in C, and I'll whistle through the intro. It's on the 5 because it's like a steel intro. I hope I don't fuck this up. 1, 2, 1. Yeah, today I passed you on the street, and my heart fell at your feet. Well, I can't help it if I'm still in love with you. Somebody else walked by your side, and he looked so satisfied. I can't help it if I'm still in love with you. Well, a picture from the past came slowly stealing as I brushed your arm and walk so close to you. And suddenly I got that old time feeling. Well, I can't help it if I'm still in love with you. And here it is. Well, it's hard to know another's lips will kiss you and hold you close the way I used to do. Oh, heaven only knows how much I miss you. Well, I can't help it if I'm still in love with you. No, I can't help it if I'm still in love with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you.
Very nice,
Thanks
man.
a lot.
That was great. That was
Hank
really fun.
Williams.
Yes.
Not a Sam Outlaw song. Hank Williams. I mean, I was thinking about it.
Oh no,
Love it. It's almost like
oh no, oh no.
All right, that was Sam Outlaw on Walking the Floor doing his rendition of I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You by Hank Williams. Now make sure you run out there and get a copy of his new record, Tenderheart. You can get on over to samoutlaw.com. You can find him on Twitter at @TheSamOutlaw. I think he's on the road right now, so make sure you get out and catch one of his gigs. And while you're doing all that, get on over to the iTunes store or anywhere else at local mom and pop record stores and buy my goddamn record, West Coast Town. You're gonna love it. You can also listen to all the past episodes of Walking the Floor, available now and forever in the iTunes store, so check that shit out, and we'll catch you next week. This is Chris Shiflett on Walking the Floor. Adios, amigos!
In trouble again.